I think you're going the other. I'm going the other way? No, now you're doing it well. That's the way. That's how you want to do it. More. That's good, huh? A little more. A touch more. A little more. Keep going, keep going. Okay, that's good. Watch this.
Over to setting up our gears, and with the front derailleur first, let's have a look at this instructional sticker. The top part of the instructions show us how to tuck away the inner wire after the anchor bolt, and the bottom part shows us at what height to set the front derailleur. So we just need to make sure that the bottom lip of the outer cage is 1 millimetre from the top of the teeth on this crane. I usually say it used to be 2 millimetres, so around about 1 or 2 millimetres. So we don't need that sticker now, because we know what to do. So using the Allen key, bring your front derailleur down till it's 1 to 2 millimetres from the top of the teeth on your crank. Looking down on the front derailleur, you can see the front edge leans inwards whilst the back edge kicks out. So loosen the hanger bolt, align the outer plate with the teeth of the chainring whilst making sure that you don't alter that 1 millimetre height gap that you've already set, then tighten the hanger bolt. Right, so now to get the cable tension correct, take off the little top cap and expose the anchor bolt with a 4 millimetre Allen key. Just undo that. Make sure the cable's relaxed by putting it in the low position. That's the small lever on the side there. In other words, the small chainring. Then pull the cable through while it's loose. Pull, if it's tight, just pull a little bit so it's a little bit firm tension. Then do it up. And then try it out with the lever a few times. And you'll see your front derailleur move. And then you can feel the tension of the cable at the back, if it goes slack or not, as the outer cable settles in. So now you can tighten the anchor bolt on your front derailleur. Put your cable underneath where it's supposed to go there. That tricky little loop under there, and then the cap back on, like so. So we'll now do the rear derailleur. Now to line up the rear derailleur, you need your rear wheel because that's got the cogs on it. And so we need to put the rear wheel in. And to put the rear wheel in, you'll need to take out the little stopper block inside your caliper, otherwise your disc won't go through. So you remove that first. And put your chain on. Now you'll start off in the smallest gear. Just use your fingers manually and push the derailleur over as far as it goes. This one doesn't go any further. We need to go up into the first gear, into the largest cog, so we'll need to adjust the stopper screw for that gear. These are your limit screws, L and H. Sometimes it's hard to remember which one is what. Just remember L means largest cog. So undo that screw a couple of turns anti-clockwise and let's try again. So it's gone up one cog, so we need to undo it a little bit further yet. Done. Now the next adjustment. Now hear that noise? That's because the guide jockey wheel is too close to the cog there. So we need to adjust the B screw to pull it back a bit. So there's the limit screws, and here is the B screw. Adjusting the B screw in, that's clockwise, moves the guide jockey away from the cogs. And try it again. That's better. Now the ideal position is to have it close enough to that cog, that large cog, without making that noise. And you back it off a bit. So I'm going to do is bring it back a bit. Try it again. Right, till we get that noise. There it is. So now we'll just get it in the right position. That's it. Maybe a fraction more. There we go. Beautiful. And then click your lever, the small one here, so it goes right down to the smallest cog on the back. Now this isn't quite making it, not quite down to the bottom cog. So now you adjust your other screw, the top one, just let that out a bit. The derailleur will move itself out of fraction. And it should drop down. There we go. Yep, lovely. Right, so just make sure that anchor bolt at the back's nice and tight now. 4mm Allen key. Now to do your front derailleur, put in the big cog on the back and a small one at the front. And your chain should be just missing the inside cage of your front derailleur there. So now if it's touching the little grub screw on the outermost, you adjust. I think it's a 2mm again. So here we go. This one is not adjusting, but you'll soon hear it go tick, 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 tick. So you just need to back it off. That's the outside grub screw. So once you've got that, then go down on your rear to the smallest one, and then go up of the front to the big chainring. Now, it shouldn't be rubbing on the cage either. It should be approximately central. If the chain's rubbing on the outer cage, you need to turn that inner grub screw anti-clockwise. Now, the outer part of your front derailleur, the cage, should miss the inside of your crank there by the same distance from when it starts to go past the bottom as to the top. So the big cog at the back and the small at the front, it shouldn't be rubbing on the inside of your front derailleur, and then go down to the smallest cog on the back and your big chainring at the front, and it shouldn't be rubbing anywhere as well, not on the crank or on the chain on the cage of the front derailleur. Right. So now you can cut the inner cables on the derailleurs. Now you don't really need an end on your cable here. What I usually do is I pull it out, cut it as close as I can, and it falls back in there and just stays there. It's not going to go anywhere. For the rear derailleur, only leave about 2 centimetres. That's all you need. It's up to you what you want to do. And this one you'll need a cap. So put a little cap on the end there, crimp it on. These are crimpers. There you go. A quick refreshment. And on to the brakes. Now you don't need all this, but at least a basic hydraulic bleed kit. And hydraulic fluid, here we're using Shimano mineral oil. Get yourself some rags because you're bound to spill some fluid somewhere along the line. Always say a minimum of 3 rags. Remove your rear wheel, put in the bleed block and the holding screw. And put the syringe holder on your rear stay. Get your gloves and put them on if you need to, if you're allergic or have a reaction with a mineral oil. I don't have any reaction with mineral oil. I've been using it for a long time and no problems with my skin. But with DOT fluid, you must wear nitrile gloves. Now put the hydraulic fluid into your syringe. This is just one way to do it. Don't fill the syringe all the way up, leave about a centimetre and a half gap. Get as much air out of the top of the syringe as you can. Then remove the tube, put your thumb on top, quite hard, and then pull the plunger downwards. Hold the plunger downwards and look at the liquid, and you might see some bubbles coming out. This is called degassing. By just looking at the liquid on its own without pulling the plunger down, it looks like there's no bubbles, but when you pull the plunger, bubbles come. That's because it's inside the liquid. So what you're effectively doing is removing more air out of the liquid, making it more incompressible. Screw the tube back on, and then tap the syringe to remove any air that's gathered up the top. And as you push the fluid up the tube, make sure there's no air bubbles at all in the fluid. Now over to your brake caliper and open or remove the bleed port cap and put a 7mm ring spanner on the bleed port nut. I usually turn my spanner upside down, that way it keeps the handle of the spanner out of the way. Now press the handle of the syringe so the fluid goes all the way to the end of the tube and slightly overflows. This is where you get a little bit messy. As you can see, a drip came off there. Now the whole idea is so that you don't get any bubbles when you attach it to the bleed port. Wipe off any spilt mineral oil and then put the syringe in the syringe holder. Peel back your lever hood, and your bleed port screw is right here, and it's a 2mm Allen key. So undo the 2mm Allen key bolt out of that. Careful, and don't lose the little O-ring on the top. Put on the adapter, preferably use a metal one. They last longer too, but they fit really well. Now be careful that you don't cross thread. Get in just right. And you don't have to go tightening up really tight, only just sitting there nice and firm. Just nice. Then put your funnel on, and I use a clear funnel because that way you can see the fluid coming up and what's going on, how much there is. Pull out your plunger. Undo the bleed port screw, and then slowly push in the fluid. Once you've got most of the fluid in and you're pretty sure that no bubbles went in, then lock off the bleed port nut. Then remove the syringe and its tube and wipe off any spilt fluid. Put the bleed port cap back on and then use isopropyl alcohol and a clean rag and give the caliper a good clean up. Remove the funnel, remove the adapter and replace the top cap. And don't tighten it too tight. The isopropyl alcohol, you don't want oil under your hood, otherwise your hood will be sliding all over the place. Hood back on. And then do exactly the same process with the front brake. Right, that's the brakes. They're both done. Now, incidentally, I only used, there's still that much left in the original bottle, and I used none of the second bottle. So that's still brand new, yet to be opened. So this only 50 milliliter bottle, 50 mils, did both front and rear. So even though the cables, the hydraulic hoses are a little bit longer because of the integrated stem, 50 milliliters and still a little bit left over was plenty. Now we'll take the little yellow bleed blocks out of the calipers, put the brake pads in, and then we can put the wheels on. Notice with the brake pads there's right and left. The right goes on the inside of your frame and the left obviously goes on the outside. Okay, put your spring on. Then the other pad inside there. Now put the holding pin in and then the circlip on the back of the pin. Now remember, don't squeeze the levers with the wheels out, because you'll have the pistons come in and you have to redo the whole thing again. So put your wheels in and then you can put your brakes on. Now one of the best things I like about through axle is, not like the old ones where you have to make sure your wheels centre, it just goes immediately exactly where it's supposed to be, including your brakes. The rotor's in the exact spot, everything's just perfect. Now you can put your brakes on. The rotor should run in the centre of both brake pads. To achieve this, undo both of the mounting bolts so that the caliper is loose on the frame. This little spacer tool makes the job easy. Simply place it on the disc and then rotate the wheel so that it goes in between the disc and the brake pads. Once it's in place, evenly tighten up those caliper bolts. Spin the wheel backwards, remove the tool, done. So we have some leftover brake bits. What are they for, you might ask? Having a look under here, you can see there's two Allen keys holding the caliper to the mounting adapter plate. Try to remove this bolt and you can't because there's a pin preventing it from being undone. The pin is a safety feature so that you never completely lose your ability to brake if the bolts come loose. If you pull out the pin, you can now undo the bolt. And this is how it works. The bolt has an extension on the end of its thread with a head on it. If the bolt comes loose, the head hits the pin and the bolt can't come out any further. So let's put the pins in place, one for the front and one for the rear. This is the orientation of the pin and it should be fairly easy to push in. Excuse my hands. Make sure it's all the way in, just use a flathead screwdriver or something and push it in. Here's where the pin goes for the front caliper, so do the same. And finally, for the plastic holding clip, it goes here on the front caliper to prevent this bolt from coming undone. And that's it, safety features installed. Right, pedals, unboxing. You don't hear that. Bit of grease on the thread. Don't forget to put some grease on that flange there, because sometimes that can creak on your crank. And the thread in your crank. Finally, it's starting to look like a rideable bicycle. Next is to put the seat on and go for a little ride down the street and make sure we've got the levers in the right position, the right tilt, so it's comfortable on these integrated bars, and then we can do the bar tape after that. So, seat, we've just got a, I'm not sure if this one's comfortable or not. It's a Specialized Roman, so we'll give that a go. Right, check the bolt threads. You don't want the seat moving on you when you're riding. So these top two bolts have some Loctite on the thread, that's good. And the tilt bolt has a dry thread, so we're going to have to put some grease on there. And I'll put some grease on the nut side as well. This seat pole design is really good. You can alter the fore and aft and the tilt without affecting the other. There's a huge amount of adjustability and they're very strong, able to accommodate the heaviest of riders' weight. Over to the seat clamping system, remove your seat post, then take out the bolt and the nut and the push plate. Grease the thread of the bolt. Then with the washers, there's one each side, they engage with the push plate. They will need some light amount of grease on her as well. So the parts that you want to slip, you put some grease on, and the parts that you want to grip, like your seat post in the frame, because you don't want that sliding down, so you don't grease your seat post, it's carbon. So you use some grip paste, carbon fibre grip paste. So put that not only on the seat post itself, but also put some of your fingers inside the frame. Reassemble the seat clamp system. Now some more carbon paste on the face plate of that plunger. Now you can insert the seat post. Now at this point we can do the bike fit. So I'm taking the measurements from my Canyon and I'm going to transfer them over to the Yoeleo R12. It's basically height, length and angle. Even getting to the exact millimetre, the bikes can still feel different when riding. The final decisions are always made after a couple of weeks of riding. Once you're happy with the measurements, tighten the bolts to the correct torque and then clean up the excess carbon paste and grease. Check that your front wheel is tracking straight and in the middle of your handlebars. Can be frustrating sometimes. In the workshop it looks straight, you go for a ride and it looks slightly out. But that's alright, you can always fix it up during or after a ride or two. And once you've got your levers exactly where you want them, tighten those clamp bolts up. One last check, see how quiet it is when we do the drop test. There's no chain on this and the floor's a bit noisy. Not one rattle anywhere. Nothing loose at all. Even the rear derailleurs behave. Excellent. So I'll put the chain on now. Well, very nice. Of course, only went around a couple of blocks, 4 or 5 blocks. We need a decent ride to tell, but really nice. I'm not going to give any first impressions away because you need to go for a decent ride. Number one, the rear brake was squeaking. New pads, probably need a bit of wearing in, we'll do something about that. And the seat angle is just a smidgen out, about a millimetre or a millimetre and a half out. So I've got to tilt that, I can't remember, forward, nose down a little bit. Very nice. Oh. Now, hood's back, ready to put handlebar tape on. What colour? Black, of course. Now, I'm not going to go on about how to put handlebar tape on. Everybody has their own individual preferences and ideas. So, we've got a logo that says Yoeleo. You can only just see it on the front. And most of these integrated bars, the bar tape sort of starts on the outside of the logo. So you can see your logo and it just covers the rest of the bar there. Well, I like to ride sometimes on the inside with my hands inside, especially climbing hills. And when you're having a bit of a yak to the guys, blah, 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 and you're relaxing, a bit more upright and easy to hold. But with the gloves on, it should be all right on the bare carbon. See how we go. Right, bar tape. Get some isopropyl alcohol again. Always stretch, pull and stretch. You don't want to break your bar tape, but you want to stretch it all the way around as you go. Some people wind from the bottom up and others go from top down. I go top down, never had a problem. Done, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people's bikes and never had a complaint, honestly. Now with these lever hoods, they're really big, so you don't have to put a piece around your band if you want, around your band clamp. It's up to you. You can if you want to, I don't. A bit bulky. don't need to, because the lever hood will cover that anyhow, or the tape will cover it and you won't see the band. Make sure you get this little bit here in the recess in there. There's another one there. Make sure your hole's clear. Don't have handlebar tape blocking the way, otherwise you'll have a lumpy lever hood. They usually settle in anyhow. Beautiful. Something's missing. Bottle cages. The very last thing to do, bottle cages. I got these really, really cheap from the local supermarket, believe it or not. Yep, the supermarket. They had them with bike tubes and tyres and some kids' bits and pieces, and they were $6. They're like a plastic, and they're quite good. I put one. I had a couple of bottles there. I put one in, and it seemed to hold it quite good. So we'll soon find out. $6 it cost me. $6 each. Comes with bolts. So we'll see how we go. And they match quite nicely. Yay! Now these are aluminium inserts, so steel bolt, aluminium or titanium, whatever it is. Anyway, metal on metal, grease. And how much does the entire bike weigh? 8.5 kilograms. We're finished.
It'd be nice to do. It'd be fun descending it.
And we beat the rain. We all survived? We all survived, alright. So this is the 5th ride today, and it was a big ride. 1,500 metres, 90 something k's or 100 k's. So the bike, just briefly, excellent, no problem. I've got a little noise, I reckon it's the cable somehow touching up here, only on a really rough surface. I think I noticed about twice. Maybe it's touching the steerer tube or something inside here. And I've got a little creak on my seat. I think I've got to find when I change seat over, because that seat I took off the R6 because the other one's just not comfortable. That, what is it, a Roman or something, Roman. So I took the R6 seat off and put that on. Specialised and much more comfortable. So excellent, we did everything today. Hills, ups, downs, fast, twisty turnies, wind, headwind, tailwind, fast, slow. What else is there? It's wet. Wet, dry. Everything tested it out. So all done, excellent, very good.